Okay, I've got 3 minutes to help you with Kant's preface. He divides learning up into three different categories. One is physics, ethics, and logic. Now, physics is mostly worried about material objects. A rock is a good example of a material object. Something that has density, shape, size, color, mass. That's a physical object. Physics just worries about coming up with the rules that control how physical objects do things in the world. Now, logic is the other extreme, and it deals with what are called metaphysical objects. Now, metaphysical objects are still absolutely objects. They just don't have the same density, shape, size that material objects have. But logic deals with metaphysical objects, and I'll give you some examples of those. They're ideal or ideas, right? So ideal objects are things like freedom or truth or beauty. You can't put love in your backpack, but it's still a real thing. You have love for others. You hold love in some sense. And so love is a real object. So is freedom, though freedom isn't something with weight or shape or color or size. And there are rules about how metaphysical objects interact in the world. And those rules are often determined by logic, right? So a rule of logic helps us to understand how ideas can interact with one another. Now, the third kind of learning is called ethics. Now, ethics Kant divides into two different camps. Camp number one is practical anthropology, and that's like the physics side of ethics. To do practical anthropology, you watch people, you see how they behave, and then you come up with rules to live by based on how people behave. On the other hand, ethics can be done logically. Now, when you deal with ethics logically, you're not dealing with real people doing real actions. What you're doing is thinking through the ideas of good and bad, the ideas of morality, and you do so using rules of logic. Now, what ethics is trying to do overall is tell people how to use their freedom. So when you're telling people how to use their freedom and you're doing it based on rules of logic, then you're doing what's called metaphysics of morals. When you're telling people how to use their freedom based on how people live, how people act, then you're doing practical anthropology. Kant is not concerned with doing practical anthropology at all. The only thing he really wants to do is metaphysics of morals. So he's writing what he calls the foundation or the grounding for the metaphysics of morals. He's just trying to explain how you would go about using logic to come up with rules of freedom. So the basic aim of our discussion of Kant will be using logic to come up with rules for freedom.